Welcome to episode 34 of Inside Politics, for teens by teens, where I explore the politics and issues impacting our generation. I'm your host, Christina Li, and today I'm focusing on the interplay between public affairs and public policy. For this, I've invited Brad Bosserman, the head of corporate and brand partnerships at Politico. Brad, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am good, thank you for asking. So let's jump right in. So you are the face of Politico to major brands and corporations. So I guess, how do you maintain a balance between presenting your own personal values and Politico's brand?
Yeah, so it's really important to Politico that we maintain our reputation for being nonpartisan, fair, and credible. That's the core of our journalism, and that in turn is the core of our business. And so for me, as someone who used to work in public affairs and policy for a long time and was involved in politics, you have to learn to check your personal politics at the door. And you really recognize that what we have is a platform that empowers anyone who wants to come and utilize it to access our audience, and then so that we don't kind of make decisions about kind of who we will or will not allow on our platform. For me personally, I think that the way that I and a lot of my colleagues think about it is that just as I have a lot of personal political views, one of those is that it's never been more important for impartial, highly credible, nonpartisan journalism to be holding the powerful to account, and that I get to go to work every day and support an institution that does that. And so that is kind of the higher order political belief that I act on every day in my professional world.
Understood. So I guess just staying on that topic of being unbiased, how does Politico stay true to its mission and maintain independence from advertisers' money?
Yeah, so we have a really important understanding between our newsroom and in the business side, where I obviously work, that there's a strict wall in the sense that we will never allow an advertiser or the presence of an advertiser or their views to impact coverage. And we communicate that incredibly clearly to all of our advertisers up front, and they know that what they're doing when they engage with us is not paying in order to influence coverage. What they're paying for is access to our audience. And they are working with us because they want some kind of an engagement with the powerful and influential people who rely on Politico every day. And so oftentimes they know that that means that if they're Facebook sponsoring our Playbook newsletter, that there's going to be content in there that is critical of Facebook. But that's exactly the place that they have to show up, because if people are reading that, they want to be able to make their position clear as well. And so we are always very upfront with our partners and our advertisers that those conversations are going to be happening regardless of whether or not they show up. So we encourage them to make their perspective clear through brand content, through advertising, through our podcasts, etc. But there's never any push or pull, because we make it clear up front.
Understood. So I guess in what cases have you had to turn advertisers down? I guess in the case of like a conflict of interest?
So for us, we went through a lot of these conversations, specifically in the 2015 and 2016 election, when a lot of publishers were grappling with whether or not to accept certain types of political advertising. And so as an institution, consistent with the belief that I talked about before, we came to the conclusion that we needed to accept advertising from anyone who had a message that met our standards. And so as long as the actual creative or the message they were running was factual, as far as we could tell, was not inciting violence, was not racist or homophobic or anything like that, that we could not put ourselves in a position of saying that this organization or candidate gets to run, this organization or candidate doesn't. Because the fact is, as soon as you do that one time, then that means that everything that you do allow to run is endorsed by the organization. If we said that, then all of a sudden you are making those calls. So we are a neutral platform. We don't make those calls. We allow anyone who has a message that meets our standards to be present there. And it's not for us to decide, it's for our audience to decide.
Understood. So I guess now that we're still in the midst of the pandemic, how has COVID-19 affected political advertising?
So at first, like most places, everything kind of froze up in March and early April of this year, and then since then, it's really opened back up for us. I think that we've been incredibly fortunate because we have a business that's built on corporations and brands trying to reach influential people in Washington, New York, Sacramento, Brussels, all sorts of power centers around the world in order to ultimately influence brand reputation, legislative activity, those types of issues. And those are the types of things that are not nice to have, they're must have. And so when you see a budget for a corporation from an advertising perspective go from $1 billion to $1 million, they still need to spend that money with Politico. We're just not discretionary in that same way. So we're actually having the best year from a revenue perspective that we've ever had. We're about to close one of the biggest Q3s we've ever had, and that really speaks to the specific relationship that we have with our partners and with our advertisers.
Understood. So as you know, this podcast is targeted towards members of Gen Z, and there's a nice statistic out there that by 2030, 70 million current members of Gen Z will be of voting age and thus represent 24% of the voting bloc. So I guess what is Politico's Gen Z strategy for targeting this demographic?
So for us, it's a great question, and it's something that we increasingly are talking about how to engage with younger folks. And so I think that for us, it's a little bit specific because our target audience, while we have a pretty broad reach, we have about 55 million people who come to Politico every month, but we're really focused on providing essential value to the most influential decision makers and then the people around them in their orbit. And those are the folks who our advertisers are trying to reach. Those are the folks who our journalists are really writing for. Then obviously there's concentric circles of people outside of those who find politics and policy interesting. And so with us, when we look at engaging younger generations, Gen Z, who are teens and early 20s now, we really are invested in making sure that our brand and our content is relevant to folks as they enter the halls of power, for those who are interested in taking on positions as decision makers in the private sector and public sector. And so when we look out and approach our marketing and the types of people that we're engaging, the content and the platforms we're on, whether it's Apple News, whether it's other types of off-platform places from podcasts, which skews younger, et cetera, we really want to make sure that we're a brand that resonates with folks when they start taking their first jobs down that pathway on Capitol Hill, in a new administration, at a company if they're on a career track, et cetera. So I think we think about a lot about our platform strategy, about our content strategy, and about our marketing strategy for those individuals.
Understood. So I guess just pivoting back to the money part of this conversation, but also just looking at the broader sphere of politics. And so we know that billions are being spent in politics, elections, and campaigns. So how do you think we can ever have a fair and just electoral process?
Boy, well, that's it's a little above our pay grade as a publisher. I think that there's, as long as we have a system that allows for, incentivizes massive amounts of spending, you're always going to find that spending going to as many places as it can to influence the outcome as you can. I think that there's models that are different when you look at like Europe, for instance. We have a very active presence across Europe with Politico.eu, and the spending looks different from a campaign perspective. But I really think that's an issue that has to be resolved at the legislative level. And I think there are certainly strong arguments for potentially shortening the length of the campaign cycles, for limiting the ways that money can be spent, or for opening up transparency. And I think that kind of we're downstream of those decisions ultimately.
Understood. So I guess with the election coming up, that's just one big political thing that's on everybody's mind. So I guess what's the dynamic between, I guess, political campaigns trying to influence the media, and especially, I guess, from the viewpoint of Politico?
I mean, it's constant, right? I mean, it's like when you look at like our reporters, I mean, we have folks who are covering every aspect of this. We have about 400 people in our newsroom. We have more policy and political reporters than anyone else in the world covering these types of issues. And so whether it's the folks on the White House beat, folks on the campaign beat, our flagship newsletter authors, the campaigns are constantly in their ears trying to shape these narratives. And for them, it's about drawing on all of their experience and all of their sources to be able to communicate to our audience not only what they're saying, but to contextualize that. And you know, is it true? Does it comport with what they're hearing elsewhere? It's an incredibly noisy environment, which is part of what makes it really exciting. And part of the reason why you really need, and I think there's a lot of value in having real reporters, fact-based journalists who are really deeply sourced and can contextualize and understand these types of perspectives that they're being constantly sold. Because I think that when you have an interaction between campaigns and reporters who are veterans and are under the watchful eye of veteran editors at a place like Politico, it's very different than when you see these other polarized outlets that are much less provide much less scrutiny, right? And are basically just megaphones for one side or the other side. That's a much easier door to push on for them. It's much harder, I think, for them to necessarily engage, or maybe less satisfying for them to engage with a more in-depth, nonpartisan newsroom like ours. But ultimately, I think that the content that is generated by that process is of much higher value to our readers and consumers, which is why they turn to it.
Understood. So I guess pivoting back to you and your experiences, so you've had a really incredible career. So you've worked at CSIS and NDN, and now you're at Politico doing amazing things. So what would you suggest for teens who aspire to your kind of success?
So I think that one of the things I often tell people that I mentor and coach and talk to is to think about your career as developing skill sets, and to spend a lot of time reading LinkedIn profiles and job descriptions of people who have jobs that you think you would like one day, so you get a better sense of what are the types of not only experiences they've had, but skills that they've developed. And so as you think about your first job, your second job, your third job, that they're hardly ever going to be your dream job. Like no job is probably everyone's dream job and checks all of your boxes, but whether or not you're going to do it, to think about how you're filling out that toolbox is eventually going to get you enough of the types of experiences and that are going to allow you to get the type of job that you do want down the road. And so it could be maybe a job that is doing the type of thing you want to do, but not at the type of place you want to be doing it, right? That can still be really valuable for you if you understand that context, or the reverse can be true. And so I think that that's one important thing. And I think the other thing that I talk to a lot of folks, whether they're have a job or if they're job searching, that one of the best ways to network and grow your skills is to think about everything that you can do beyond your actual job. And I know that side hustles are very popular these days. And I think that both, not even necessarily from a revenue perspective and like gaining money and having this be a separate income stream, but what are the types of extracurricular projects and partnerships and organizations that you can be involved in that give you a calling card for the type of work that you want to be doing, so that when you reach out to someone, instead of saying, hey, you know, I'm reaching out because I want to pick your brain and I'd love to work in the industry you're working in. Instead, you can say, hey, I'd love to talk to you. I actually have a video podcast that I'd like to see you on, or I'm working on someone helping edit their book that's on a topic that you're knowledgeable about, right? And so developing these other types of things that are more entrepreneurial, that are very much in the area where you want to be working eventually, like you can just do it, right? You don't have to wait for someone to hire you to do it. You can do it on your own. You can find other like-minded people and use that to be part of your calling card.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess also just pivoting back to Politico, what advice do you have for teens who aspire to make a difference in how political news reaches the masses in terms of political journalism?
I think that what's so important for folks to understand in working in media is around the way that people are getting it and are processing and accessing information and news is just changing so rapidly. One of the things I find so interesting about working in the digital first news and media business is just the dynamism of it, how every single day we constantly have to be thinking about what's changing and how are we adapting. And I think that there's an enormous opportunity for folks in Gen Z to really reimagine what are the platforms that this is going to be processed on. What are the ways that this reporting is going to be told? I think that the bedrocks of nonpartisan reporting are really critical and valuable, but that doesn't have to live in any particular way. And so I think that I'm really hopeful that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, hopefully less, that there's a lot more experimentation around the way that important nonpartisan political journalism can live in a way that is really responsive to the way that Gen Z and younger people want to consume information, a way that's native to them. It's not just a website.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much, Brad, for joining me here today. I really appreciate your insights. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see everybody next time on Inside Politics. Hi, everyone. This is Christina. Thank you so much for watching Inside Politics, and please feel free to check out the rest of the interviews on my channel. See you next time.